Welcome back. Well, we start our focus with taking a look at decisions by INEC. Let's cross over to Abuja.
Oh, thank you, Chamberlain. We do have with us Osaze-Uzzi, who is the Director of Voter Education at INEC. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, just 2 days ago, not 2 weeks now, just 2 days ago, we did hear on the floor of the Senate, senators threatening to go on strike, sort of, if INEC doesn't conduct elections in River State, and some other areas, but River State in particular. Only recently, too, we also hear that INEC has now fixed dates for elections in Rivers and the FCT, and I think one other place, Lagos State as well. What has taken INEC so long?
Well, let us take each one separately. Lagos and the FCT councillorship vacancies only recently arose. And you cannot start fixing dates until you're informed formally of the existence of a vacancy in the State House or House of Representatives. As for the Rivers, a good question. But the issue is we forget that this is not the first time we have attempted to go back to River State. This deals with 2015 elections. Elections were conducted, the members of the respective houses that are sitting. But in between, some of those elections were annulled. And in March, we went back, pursuant to the court orders, to go back to conduct the elections. First of all, the judgments of some of these cases did not come out on time in terms of when you annul an election for particular areas, you have to ensure that you only conduct elections in those areas, because in many of the instances, it was not the whole constituency. It was in some particular area. So you have to get the judgment and read the judgment to see which areas you're going to conduct that election in. So you have to be certain about that, first of all. But secondly, in March, we had come back to try to conduct this election. What you carried out quite extensive reports of what happened or transpired when INEC went back to River State to conduct election. Widespread violence, regrettably and very sadly, led to the death of an official of the commission, a youth corps member, Samuel Okonta, lost his life. People tend to forget that. And each time we've tried to mobilize to go back, there have been several issues and tensions arising which could possibly lead to a breakdown of law and order. And the law enjoins INEC to postpone an election when there's a likelihood of a breakdown of law and order. So one has to be very, very careful. Lives are so important, and there's no point conducting an election under an atmosphere of violence, as if it's a theater of war. And your reports were quite comprehensive on that. So that is why it took so long. We had to do widespread consultations. We had stakeholders meeting here in Abuja. We've had several stakeholders meetings in the various constituencies in River State and also in Port Harcourt. And court cases asking INEC not to declare results, not to continue with the conduct of election in several places. So all these things are there.
We will come back and explore these reasons a bit further, but we'll take a moment now. Sunrise Daily will continue shortly. Do join us again. Osaze-Uzzi, Director for INEC for Voter Education at INEC, is still with us here in the studios. And just before we went on break, you were talking about the reasons why INEC had not conducted elections in some of the states, especially Rivers State. In Rivers, you said that there was an attempt by INEC in March to conduct elections, which led to the death of an INEC official. And since that time, we've not conducted. There's been no elections, conducted by INEC in Rivers State. It's been at least 8 months. Even if INEC were mourning, by now, the mourning period should be over, don't you think?
Well, for most of us, it's just a statistics, but somebody died. That's fundamental. That is important to us. But not just that. The fact that after that kind of incident, where there was widespread threats and widespread violence, you have to be very careful how you go back. We have to do reverse logistics, but before we go forward, we have to be very careful how we do that. There was a lot of tension, and we had to do a lot of consultations. We had to get traditional rulers, we had to get leaders of thought to intervene, to talk to the politicians, to see to douse tension.
You've been doing that for all of 8 months?
Yes. Yes, a lot of things. They're step by step by step. That is one of the things. The Institute of Child Mediators went into the process. We had a meeting in Abuja, and then we fixed the date. But after fixing that date, we started preparing, and we're getting ready to go back. And the next thing, a local government office was burned down. And there were 1 or 2 killings just on the eve, or 1 or 2 days to the elections. We now had to again suspend the election. So it's not as if we've just sat down and folded our arms. No. And you will not go into for an election to cover an election when there's a serious threat to your life. You will not do that. We will not expose journalists. We will not expose observers. We will not expose voters or our officials where there's clear and imminent danger. So it's not as if we folded our arms and sat down. We've done severally. We've tried to go back. And we fixed the date, I think it was the 30th of July or so, in June, so we'll go back to the 30th of July. We conducted elections in other places outside of River State for that period. In Kano, that was characterized by violence, in Mjibe State constituency, we did go ahead and conduct the election. In Kogi, we conducted the election. And these were fixed about the same time. But in processing and proceeding to mobilizing to Rivers, our office got burnt and threats were
Let's
carried
go
out.
to Lagos now for some questions.
It's good to have you join us this morning. The most, foggy thing is trying to put all of this into a better perspective for better understanding. Don't forget that Rivers, for instance, you say you have tried to see how you can mobilize and move into Rivers. And you've also told us about security issue. Tell us the difference between what has happened in Rivers and what happened in Edo, because after the security operatives came up with a warning, INEC insisted on going further with that election until finally, less than a few hours to that day, they changed plans and had to fix it. Did you decide to fix Edo election having in mind the lapse, talking about the time that you had within which to fix that election? That was why you went ahead, or was it because security was all clear for that date? If you put this with what has happened in Rivers, it would seem as if the commission didn't put Rivers as one of the most important on its table to conduct the election until we saw the Senate move on this matter.
I beg to disagree, because the circumstances in Edo and Rivers were different. First of all, let me explain the Edo scenario. Edo had, we fixed 10th of September for conduct of elections. We were in Edo in Benin City at a stakeholders forum a couple of days to the elections, on the Wednesday before the election. And the DIG represented the Inspector General of Police, the Deputy Inspector General represented, and he said at that stakeholders forum that the police were ready, the security agencies were ready, the director of SSS of Edo State was there. And they said they were ready. And but as that meeting was concluding, we had information, first of all from social media, later on carried by mainstream media, that I think the Deputy Commissioner of Police in Abuja had just done a news briefing saying that the security was not conducive for conduct of elections. Now, there's a bit of a problem here. We did not hear directly from the security agencies. In fact, we heard to the contrary, because I was at that stakeholders meeting where the DIG said they were ready to go on. So when you have this kind of thing, you are not going to base your decision, a major policy decision, as to consider a shift in the elections based on what you heard from third-party sources. There are chains and lines of communication. We have an interagency consultative committee on electoral security, and of course our office were open to receive communication from the DSS and from the police. We did not receive these things. So based on that, when we're asked, we reconvened the stakeholders meeting and said, what do we do? We said, well, we cannot act on that, as it were, hearsay, third-party information. Let us try and get in touch with them. And there's nothing official coming from these agencies. So we did say we are proceeding with the election as scheduled. It was a reaffirmation of saying we are proceeding. But later on that evening, about 6:30 in the evening, both the Inspector General of Police and the DG of this wrote formal letters to the Commission outlining that there's some threats, and it will be advisable to consider proceeding with the election on 10th of September.
So, in other words, for Rivers,
there was no flip-flop
for Rivers State, I'm happy for that clarification. Allow me to just come in here again. For Rivers State, on whose security report did you base your action on not conducting election in Rivers? If you say it's about security, since you have adhered to security report in Edo and a couple of other places, on whose report did the Commission base their action?
On our own reports and in consultation with the Interagency Committee on Electoral Security, which comprises the police, the DSS, paramilitary forces like the NDLEA, the prisons, the immigration. There's that committee of about 16 agencies met. When the atmosphere was when we thought the atmosphere was conducive, we proceeded in July to go to conduct the election. Agreed to go fix the dates at the meeting held in Abuja with all the stakeholders. It was agreed that I think it was 30th of July will be conduct of election. But a couple of days that time, there were palpable threats. There was a likelihood of breakdown. There was a breakdown in some places. Our office, a local government, was burnt down. And at that stage, and when we saw the way things are, the emergency meeting of that intelligence committee, we said, look, it's not advisable to go back. Things obviously are not right, even though we had received some assurances that things were fairly okay. But we couldn't go back at that time.